Welcome to the Boat Babe podcast with your favorite boat babe here, Mary Allison. Here we talk boats, DIY projects, and manifestation tips to living your best vacay life on the water. If anything's going to happen, y'all know it. It's going to happen out there. So let's go explore together. Welcome back to another episode of the Boat Babe podcast with your favorite boat babe, Mary Allison. So today's episode is going to kind of be a summary of everything I could think of that I wished I would have done or would have planned for or would have expected before we had hauled out back in September. I can't believe it's been that long. I mean, that is crazy how long we were out for. And honestly, I haven't gotten to process the fact that we just spent over, it's insane the amount of money we spent on the yard just to sit there. And so it kind of gives me perspective of what would I have changed? What would I have done different? What could I have bought that I didn't need to borrow or that I didn't need to rent? So basically what I wish I knew before I started my project in the yard and how to prep before hauling your boat out. You know, it's a really big deal and it's really expensive. And there are ways to cut down costs and there's ways to cut down time. And I wish I had had somebody that kind of guided me along the way this time around. You know, when we had I had pulled the boat out in I think the end of 2019, done the bottom job myself, took out the forward black water tank, literally chucked it over the side. I was like, this thing's pointless. Nobody's using this toilet other than it's just like one of those storage rooms up in the forward head. So, and the tank was just gross. So I threw that over the side. It was done. You know, there was projects I was able to, buff and wax the hull, trying to maintain the life of the paint job, worked on the teak. And I was out 3 months then, but what did I do? I did basically the whole thing by myself. I had a guy in the yard help me because he was able to, I guess somebody was helping him sand. So he was able to have his friend sand the bottom of my boat, but that's basically all he did. And this time around, I kind of put myself in the exact same position, honestly. I just, maybe it's just maybe I've got some stuff to work on and I just have a hard time asking for help. But anyway, let's get into it. So if you have a sailboat like mine, if you have a yacht, if you have a smaller boat, this kind of is just a broad suggestion. If you plan to be in the yard for 4 days, most likely your boat's going to look like a boat that's only been in the yard for 4 days. And what I mean is every boat out there is going to have something that needs to be done. And I'm not talking about brand new boats. I'm not talking about your 64-foot Viking or, your huge Hatteras where you just need some more prop speed, or maybe you're just wanting a new bottom job. I'm not really talking about those. But there were people that would come in the yard and they're like, we're going to go back in on Monday. And I'm like, what? It's Thursday. What? What are you going to get done? And they would just hurry up, change out a couple things, do a new bottom job and put it back in. And I'm sitting there like, are you not going to address anything else? And people don't, they're like, they don't care. They want to get it done. They don't want to spend the money and they want to throw it back in the water. And that's just not that doesn't work for me. First of all, it's not safe. If you have that mindset, it's most likely you're going to get yourself into a situation where you're like, oh shit. Preventative maintenance was just kind of skipped over. If that's how you're maintaining your boat. And also take advantage of the time that you're already hauled out. The most expensive part about hauling out is usually the haul out itself. And so if you can add on a couple more days, maybe hire a kid in the yard to buff and wax your hull, or even just take some time, maybe polish your stainless, things that you just don't typically do in the water because you're preoccupied doing other things. Maybe you're preoccupied sailing and traveling. If you take the time and spend the days actually looking at your boat from a boatyard perspective, then in the long run, it's totally worth it. And unfortunately, especially with sailboats, you can't just stick them in a shed, without taking the mast down. The weather is such a huge issue. I mean, just like I've said before, I can't imagine having a yard in South Florida and expecting anything to be done because it's like constant rain. I know their regulations are very strict, and I am so blessed that we have been here in Alabama where you just kind of do what you want to do. Because our coastline is so small, I think our rules, regulations, Coast Guard stuff is just very limited. And so we were able to spray in open air. I didn't have to take my mask down. Overspray got on other boats around me. Oh, okay. Like it just, you can be as careful as you can, but I didn't have to tent my whole boat. And in the long run, I still don't think I would have tented it. I can't imagine trying to take my masts off. Like, I feel like that would have just been so big that I don't know. I don't know. Where we've been has been perfect. But definitely plan around the weather. I mean, there were probably half of the lay days were because of rain, either rain, over 100-degree heat, freezing temperatures, crazy winds. I mean, there was a handful of days in huge chunks where I could actually get stuff done. And then the rest was like, okay, well, let me just see what I can do downstairs. Like, what am I going to do down below? You're kind of just like finding things to do at that point. Also something that, if there's something that needs major attention on your boat, go ahead and do it in the yard. Like, just do it. There's going to be extra help, especially like I've said, if you're a sailor and you're not in an area where there's tons of sailboats, most likely you're going to have a harder time finding somebody to come out to the dock and help you than you are in the yard. Because a lot of people in the yard, they see your boat, they see what kind of, they see the size, they have more flexibility with whatever they can fix versus, and their tools are there. There's mechanics there. There's just more people there to help versus, okay, well, I'm just going to get partial this and this done here, but then I'm going to go back to the dock and I'm going to see if the mechanic can come out and do this and X, Y, and Z. It just is more beneficial to get it done while you're in the yard. And so one thing that I made a mistake on is when we were hauling out, you basically, you sign your life away to the marina. Like, if anything goes wrong, it's definitely not their fault. And one thing you can check is like, what do you need done? And, like at Barber and Saunders, down the Intercoastal, same thing. Like, they have guys in the yard that can do everything for you, or you can hire the guys that have smaller businesses in the yard to do the exact same work. The pricing's going to be different. The time frame's going to be different. Most likely you're not going to pay as much. And so I only marked the box that I was going to do a bottom job. So I was thinking, well, I'm just hauling out for a bottom job. Everything else is fine. I don't know. And so then we get it on the stands where it's a perfect area to do the bottom job. And I decided to spray the hull and prep and sand and spray and prep and sand and spray. And so every single time they need to move you in the yard, it's basically like getting hauled out again. And you pay the same as if they put you back in the water and pull you back out. And so I learned that the hard way. I wish I would have asked questions. I wish I would have said, hey, if I decide to spray, can I be here? And unfortunately, they actually said I could be where I was. Multiple people were like, no, you're fine to spray right here. But that one person complained and they had to move me. And because I didn't check that little box that said I might be spraying a new hull side, I might be doing something spraying, they put me in an area where that one person could have, was able to complain. So there goes another $600 and I moved to the stall. Well, after being in the stall, they needed to move me out of the stall to move somebody in for sandblasting. There you go, another $600. Well, then I needed to go back in the stall. There's another $600. I needed to come back out. I mean, so definitely ask questions. If you have a slight inkling that you're going to do something a little bit more than you're planning, just go ahead and mark it. Like, you're not going to get charged for it. It'll just open the door to where you can at least have suggestions. You can be, it just is better for communication and it'll save you money in the long run. And so this is also something that, okay, I wanted to do my own paint job. It was like, I don't know, it felt like a bucket list thing. It's something I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn how to spray. I wanted to learn how to prep. I love my boat so much. I mean, like I've said, y'all, she is my wife. Like, she is my life. I love everything about her. And so after learning on YouTube how to do a paint job, I realized that I'm probably could have asked Barber what the cost for a paint job would be and what that looks like. Like, break down every step. How much, like, okay, let's say it cost 40 grand. Okay, well, how much is that in prep work? How much of that is in the actual spraying process? How much of that is in supplies and paint? Because what I learned is I can prep a boat all day. I mean, it's absolutely exhausting, but it's fine. It's sanding. Get the right sandpaper, all that stuff, scaffolding, get a lift. Like, prepping the boat is physically the hardest part about doing a paint job, but it's kind of like the no-brainer part in a sense, because you can just kind of figure it out as you go. The painting part, the prepping the plastic, you have to have somebody. It's almost impossible to do alone. And I'm just talking about the hull right now. But the spraying part is where I have never been trained by any professional to spray. I have a spray tan company where I spray naked women. Skin is completely different than fiberglass. And so my technique was fine, except I wasn't spraying enough paint. I wasn't spraying close enough to the hull. I wasn't leaving a wet line to spray over to continuously have that glossy finish look. And so I wish I would have asked more questions, because I have a feeling, because the prep work and for the paint job takes so long, that I have a feeling the actual spraying part would have probably cost a lot less, and I probably would have saved money, like hiring somebody from the beginning to spray the paint, not necessarily the primer, like that I could handle, but spraying the paint. And I would have cut down on God only knows how many lay days, honestly, like a lot. And, go up to the top side. That is like a whole freaking puzzle. Like, it is absolutely okay. Priming it isn't as difficult because primer is not as sticky. You can rub primer. You can rub your hose on primer. It's okay. I did that myself. But thank God I had Cody in the yard who helped me paint, because he's the one that taught me, let's prep and spray this section, and then we're going to move to the next section in the next weather window. And I'm like, why? Like, why can't we just get this whole thing knocked out? But after moving around the paint, trying to also keep your legs from hitting the edge of wet paint, keeping the hose from hitting it, keeping dust off of it and trash off of it, and when a big wind gust coming through, like, doing it section by section is something that I didn't even know. I didn't think about. And so having somebody that's an actual professional painter is so beneficial. And I went into this project with as much knowledge as I could get. I mean, I've had our boat for what, I guess coming up on 6 years, and I've been a stewardess for years. I've been a captain for 15 years. I've grown up on boats. My dad is super handy. I love learning, but getting your DeWalt sander, from Home Depot is a different animal than using a DA that hooks up to air. And so, like, I wished that, I don't even know how I would have actually found out this information, honestly. I don't know where a checklist online is to how to prep for your own paint job, what you need to haul out. I probably should start a blog on these things. But I wish we would have used the air more often. And if you are hauling out at a yard and they offer air, which it's funny because somebody asked me online, what do you do? He wanted me to talk up, and I think this is wonderful, but he said, what do you do in a yard that doesn't have electricity? And I'm like, oh, I've never even thought about that. He's like, do you use a generator? And I'm like, I mean, I guess you'd use like a little Honda generator, but also like, what do you do in a yard that doesn't have air? Because I learned after a while that using that air, like that's basically your shower at the end of the day. Just having an air hose hooked up to air, you can hose yourself off. You can hose the boat off with the air. Like you use it for the DA sander. I mean, you use it for everything. And so that's definitely one thing I wish I would have known. I would have bought my own hose instead of borrowed my boat neighbor's, because I didn't realize the hoses have different weights. And his was a lot older and it was really heavy. Well, I didn't know this, so I just got used to it until I realized, like, oh my gosh, I used a light hose and it was amazing. But, one thing I learned is like DA sanders are not as heavy as like your DeWalt sander or whatever you get from Lowe's or Home Depot. It's a lot lighter, and for some reason they don't spin off as much dust. It's weird. They're a lot quieter too, so it's a lot easier to put your earbuds in, or AirBuds. What do you call them? Earbuds. You know what I mean? And turn on like the noise cancellation, and you're not getting the background noise of the sander. And it's just, I don't know. They're actually your normal sander you get from Home Depot, they're a lot easier to use. They're heavier, but they're easier. You're less likely to screw up. But when you get like a really nice DA, you can cut the edge of your paint because the edges are so, they're so sharp, and the sandpaper is a lot thicker than like your textbook, sandpaper from Ace Hardware. But so the two brands that I wish I would have looked into, and now I know, and I'm most likely going to buy the lesser expensive one. So Dynabraid is the expensive brand for a really good DA to use if you're going to do any sanding on your boat. I'm assuming it would have probably been easier to sand the bottom. We sanded with 80 grit when we were doing the bottom job. I think it probably would have been easier to sand because it would have just been lighter weight. I mean, you're sitting there sanding upside down, and when you're using a heavy sander with a heavy, like, it's just hard. So definitely getting a DA would have been nice. Matco is less expensive, but it sounds pretty comparable to the more expensive DA. I also, maybe this is because I'm stubborn. I don't know. Maybe because like when I'm working on my boat, I don't think about my lungs because there's a big breeze. But having a 3M dust mask from Home Depot, it's the one with the big pink round filters on the sides of your cheeks. You kind of look like you look like a really cute like squirrel. That thing is like a lifesaver because it's not for paint. So you're not, you can wear it for long periods of time because it's lighter. But I mean, it just keeps that fiberglass dust out. It keeps the paint dust out. The primer, epoxy primer is just like going to eat your lungs. So it's like it keeps all that out. And I wish I would have had that from the beginning because I had makeshift ways of trying to keep the dust out of my mouth all the way to like, well, I'm just not going to breathe for the next couple minutes kind of thing. I wish I just would have had this mask from the beginning because it was really lightweight and it didn't hurt my face. Like my nose wasn't hurting at the end of the day, like some of the paint masks that you have to wear. So definitely they have that one. It's a 3M dust mask. It's from Home Depot. So I didn't find it at Lowe's, but I did find it at Home Depot. I think it's around $22 or something. And so I definitely highly suggest that you will save yourself. The reason that I feel like I'm hoarse is because, again, today I should have been wearing a mask doing some cleaning that I was doing. So, depending on how long you're out of the water, you can buy scaffolding for cheaper than renting it from the yard. I mean, I know that sounds crazy to actually go buy yourself scaffolding. Like, what are you going to do with it when you're done? But it would have been cheaper to buy the scaffolding and then selling it on Facebook Marketplace or to somebody else in the yard or selling it to the yard than just renting the scaffolding from the yard. And also, this is something I didn't do because I didn't think I needed it. I thought I could makeshift it. If your sailboat or your boat sits lower to the ground, you might not necessarily need this. But my boat is so high in the air that the only way that I can work on the hull is by using scaffolding or a lift, an electric lift. And a lot of yards offer an electric lift for you to rent. And I would have saved so much time, so much energy, and just effort. I think my paint job would have been a lot better because I would have been quicker at applying the paint myself on the hull if I would have had an electric lift that I would have rented. You'll definitely cut down on the lay days by basically, instead of like pushing the scaffolding, it's like you work on something, you push the scaffolding. You work on something, you push the scaffolding. With the lift, it's so much easier because you just can ride around the boat. So, and I did this completely backwards, you guys. If you haul out for a bottom job but need to do repairs on the top side, start with the top side. And I'm telling you this weather permitting kind of thing. If you have a really good day where it's not really hot and you've got to suit up to sand your bottom, go ahead and just sand the bottom. Like get that knocked out because that's the hardest thing that you're going to do. It's just exhausting. It's the dirtiest job. So after you're done sanding, work from the top down. I didn't do this on my boat. I started at the bottom and I worked my way to the top. But a lot of the times, if you're patient and you're not rushing, you're going to find other things that need to be repaired. Start from the top and work your way down. Because let's say you have some fiberglass repair and you need a spray. That overspray can fall on your hull. Oh, let's say you go to the hull and you realize, oh, I can, I don't know, buff and wax this, or I need to wet sand this area and do this repair. Oh, cool. Okay, well, maybe that overspray can go down. And then you're working on painting your bottom, and then you're done. Working from the top down is a lot easier. I worked from the bottom. Well, what did I do? I did bottom to middle to inside because of the heat to the hull to the bottom to the hull to the top. I mean, it was just stupid. And then boot stripes. I mean, come on. So it was just like up and down and up and down and up and down. And then I didn't even think that I was going to sand all my teak. I didn't think I was going to sand my teak down to basically be bare teak and then figure out what I'm going to do. So I made the mistake of, while I was sanding the hull, with 320, I would sand my teak with 320 because I had some oil-based varnish on there. So I was like, oh, it's fine. I'll just do some 320 and then I'll lay another layer, of varnish. Well, no. After sanding with 320 and leaving it for as long as I did while I was working on other things, it just deteriorated. The varnish started to chip off. It looked horrible. And so now I have this gorgeous paint job, and I have to be tedious with my sanding on my wood. And it's frustrating because I just want to get in there. I want to get that varnish off. I don't want to worry about nicking my paint job. I just want to get it over with, and I can't. I'm stuck. I've got to take my time. And now that I am back in the water, this is something I do wish I would have done in the yard, but I was done. I was like, I've got to get this boat floating. And so I did the rub rails, like my boat about a third down the hull has a teak rub rail. So I did that in the yard because I can't reach that really well from the dock. And my dinghy doesn't really fit on the other side. I would have to anchor out, and I didn't want to deal with that. And so everything else I can basically sand from the top. But now I've just got to be careful. I mean, I've got this gorgeous ice blue paint job that I don't want to touch. So it's going to be a tedious job. And I did reach out to somebody who has a reclaimed wood business. I don't think it's small. It sounds pretty large. I think what he does is on a pretty major scale out of Mobile. And he has some guys that can come down possibly and at least prep my teak. And so I'm not exhausted on my hands and knees going along sanding my teak for hours and hours. I think they might be able to come and knock it out. And that just cuts down on the time I've got to spend at the chiropractor and how much money I have to pay them to fix my back from all the sanding and all the work I've done. But I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope that your haul out is easier than mine was. I hope that your projects go quicker than mine did. And I can't wait to see you again next week. This week, I'm going to be taking it a little easy. We have been cleaning downstairs as much as possible because it's just filled with yard dust. And I think the next thing I'm going to work on is sanding my teak upstairs, doing another layer of all wood. Then I'm going to wet sand. I'm going to start to wet sand, buff and wax some of the paint upstairs that didn't cure as well as I would have liked because of the dew that settled on the deck too soon in the day. So I love y'all so much. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram at thatboatbabe. I would love to be your friend, and I love getting your DMs. Please go ahead and leave a positive review. Share this episode with your friends and give me 5 stars. I love you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.